Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Erica Goldwater, and I am thrilled to present this webinar for you today, Building Better QA Process, Optimizing QA in the Age of AI. I am joined today by two of my colleagues, Josh Scott, Senior Director of Solutions at Spark, and Jarius Hayes, Quality Intelligence Engineering Lead at Spark. Before we dive in, I just would love you guys to tell us a little bit about yourselves and what you do. Josh, let's start with you.
Sure. Great to be with everybody again. If you were with us in our first webinar, you already know me. I was here with Derek last time, and that is a cue for you. If you didn't tune into our last webinar, that'd be a great place to start. I head up solution consulting here at Spark, and at Spark, what we do is not only technical pre-sales, but my team also is responsible for our consulting and advisory function, as well as helping to build and incubate our offerings. So one of the greatest parts of my job is getting to work with folks like Jarius, who are deep in their specific craft. And so, Jarius, with that, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Josh. Yes, I am leading the quality intelligence engineering group at Spark. Um, right now, trying to help QA teams evolve from reactive/proactive QA to a more predictive QA. It's mainly where we're focusing on the key quality signals that travel with the work. And practically speaking, what that looks like is we're connecting things like acceptance criteria, test coverage, code changes, and other areas of risk. We embed that loop into the tools that clients are already using. And so that can help clients have better release decisions. So I'm happy to be here today, explain how we're able to productize this into Assert.IQ so that clients can not only get speed, but also get governance along the way.
Amazing. Thank you so much for the introduction. So clearly you two are the perfect people to delve into this topic and help explain this for our audience. So thank you so much. So let's go to the heart of the matter. Let's just talk a little bit about traditional QA, because from my understanding, really what it is, there's always an evolution in technology and solving problems. But really right now we're fighting the status quo. So let's talk about this a little bit. When we talk about QA and the modern process, or let's say the current process, is it fair to say that it's not working particularly well anymore, or there's room for improvement?
Oh, yeah, I can jump on this first. Um, One could argue that it's traditional QA is failing right now, especially in this age of AI. I think what it is, most orgs rightfully move from reactive QA to proactive. Mainly, we shift left, trying to prevent known issues, right? But I don't think that's enough going forward, especially when change is constant now. So the approach is still somewhat reactive, if we're honest. It's still a little bit staff heavy, kind of slow. So quality sometimes still show up late, especially when the fixes are expensive, in production. So I think the root problem isn't always effort. I think now what's being amplified is the signal, right? We're constantly reconciling intent after the fact. So the question becomes, how do we move from a more reactive and proactive QA to a more predictive quality mindset? And I think that's the paradigm shift here.
Jarius, I think one of the things you mentioned is that shift left. One of the things that, fundamentally, what we're trying to do in QA is ensure that the code that we push to production is going to perform the way we designed it to perform. And so fundamentally, the problem statement is the same. But what Jarius is bringing up that I think is really important is we want to begin to build this into our process earlier on and ensure that it's not only QA professionals like Jarius who can be doing this and have to be involved at every single step. We want to instead leverage tools like AI, better implementations of tools like Jira and Azure DevOps to shift that process left. So even in the writing of acceptance criteria, we're seeing um, we're seeing automations and AI jump into play so that we are getting test coverage over the very first part of our process rather than doing it after the fact. And that's, even though I think we're talking about current state, I wanted to make sure that we understand when Jarius and I talk about shifting left, we're both very familiar with kind of the reactive after the fact QA. And what we're trying to do with Assert.IQ and with our QA processes in general is start that process as a part of the inception of the story rather than something that we hurriedly do before we push something to production.
Right. That makes sense. And obviously that's where the sort of predictive discussion comes in. You want to do this
Exactly.
ahead of time and not after the fact. So if we're talking about the, traditional QA, so what's, the next slide, what is modern QA? You both touched on reactive, proactive, and predictive. Can we drill down on that a little bit more and talk about what that really means and why it's so important and impactful for organizations today to think about QA in this manner?
Yeah, so I think we've evolved in 3 steps, right? One, is reactive, and, that we're just finding issues late. Another, I think up to this point, maybe for the past decade or so, we've been really good at trying to be more proactive so that we can prevent known issues earlier. Um, but I think now, especially with AI, I think this new predictive part is mainly using real signals, right? And when I say signals, I mean these are sources of data points for us, right, that we can use. And this is, telemetry tools that the client may have, um, maybe some analytical tools, issue tracking systems, things that we can gather data, especially using AI. These are the signals. So proactive QA is more prevention based on, I'd say, what we already know. That is shift left, right? We fix the root causes early. Predictive quality uses the real signals that I was just speaking to, change data, telemetry, patterns. You know, these things tell us what's most likely to break next and then also how soon. So predictive is, I think, is the unlock, especially here in this new product that we have with Assert.IQ. We're mainly combining code changes, test history, production telemetry, things like that that give us a real risk forecast. So then QA can now focus on what's relevant before the failures ever even show up. And I also see modern QA embedding the idea of quality intelligence into the SDLC. Like Josh was speaking to, we can embed it into Jira, PRs, into the CI/CD. So this predictive step it's not a separate phase. We're essentially connecting, the requirements, test code, risk, all these things together in a more governed feedback loop. So confidence is now measurable and it's not just a gut check. So I think this age of AI has changed the economics, if we can say. Um, and change is constant now, and cycles are already fast and they're speeding up even faster. So quality has to be continuous and data driven.
Can Jarius, could you go a level deeper just on what you mean by signals? Because I think, you and I are talking to clients every day about the insights and inferences that we can now drive through AI around you mentioned what might happen or when it might happen or what might break next. But I think that some of that may be new to some of the folks that are listening to us. Is that something you could just go a little bit deeper in about kind of what are some of the kind of signals? You mentioned observability, you mentioned some of that, but like maybe go a level deeper of the kind of data that we're using to drive these insights.
Yeah, sure. I'll paint it like this. Let's say it's midsummer, um, and we're about to come up in Q3, Q4, right? Holiday season. Usually for a QA team, we try to harden up our frameworks make sure test coverage is sufficient, make sure test are passing at a good percentage, right? And we put that in place, and we historically we're like, that's pretty solid. What if we could use issue tracking data, go back and say, hey, this time or Q3, Q4 last year at the company, um, during holiday season, what if we can get that information, right? What if the QA team can go grab that information to find out what were the most common user flows? Where did users spend most of their time in the apps? What were the most common issues or bugs that popped up during that time? Get that information and now use that to help determine what those smoke tests or the business critical tests should be during
Yep.
the holiday season, right? We have the ability to do that now. A lot of teams may or may not be doing that, right? We can do it manually. It's a sit down with maybe the support team, help desk team, product team to go grab that information from like Jira or ADO. But imagine that being just one example of a signal, having access to that by way of some generative AI or MCP server, right? Where we don't have to go run a report. You don't have to be knowledgeable and an expert in how to run J reports and stuff like that. You can simply use Gen AI and say, hey, go find out the top, 20% of bugs that happen during the holiday season. And then within the same chat, right? Go grab this information and then tell me what the top 10% of our framework, our testing framework, our testing suite should be. What percentage of the top tests should we run during the upcoming holiday season? Again, we're doing this in midsummer, right? You can do it at any given point, but that's an example of one signal that we can use in not only that scenario, but we can use that at higher levels in the stakeholder chain of command, just to get insight on um, what are the risks that are coming up in this season or Q3, Q4 based on history, right? Again, these signals, and that's just one. We can take some other example, some observability tool, whether you're using Datadog or if you have analytics on in production, you can grab that as well. Put these things together, and it can give you a picture of what maybe happened before and what we should prepare for going forward. For a QA team, that makes us relevant. Now we're truly testing what's relevant, and we can brace ourselves and prevent um, future risks coming up, in the next holiday season. That's just a story of how you can use a signal. What a signal is, it's just a data point, right? And AI allows us to use things like Assert.IQ and MCP servers and agents to connect all of these things together, and now we have the ability to go grab this information. Um, I think, Josh, this bleeds over into the other, what is that, Ask IQ and Verify IQ within the Spark Studio Intelligence. I know this is contextual for just Third IQ, but the whole point is quality intelligence, I think, is a key point. But the bigger picture is for product teams, engineering teams, and QA to all use the same and leverage the same signals.
Yep, exactly. Well, that's a great segue, because I think it'd be good just before we dig deeper into Assert IQ, Eric, I don't know if you agree, but I think it might be good just take just a half a step back and understand kind of our viewpoint on why we created Intelligent Studio. And it really, we can go to the next slide. I think one of the things that we're realizing is that this idea of intelligence goes beyond any single area of software development. It's something that we're learning as a team, that data has the ability to unlock growth in areas that before we didn't even think were possible. I caught Jarius saying when he was explaining insights or signals the QA team could go find. Because that really is what a good QA engineer, a good QA lead would have done. They would have gone and dug through data in the past, but today it really just is a conversation with the data that we're collecting and posing scenarios to that data in ways that give us the information and the insights that we need to drive, whether it's QA or data intelligence or any of the other areas that we'll end up talking about. It We believe in this idea that using data in that way, it drives our ability to do things that we weren't able to do before. Um, and this is part of what we call hybrid intelligence or hybrid engineering. We can go to the next slide.
And Josh, just to build on that,
Yep.
and when you're talking about having that intelligence and it's embedded and it's so available, it's not an afterthought. It's part
Right.
of it, and that jump starts the whole process for any person on the team, just being able to access that information readily, right? Because you can gather data, but if it's not accessible or usable, it's not that
Yeah,
worthwhile,
no,
is it?
you're absolutely right. And what we call hybrid engineering is boiled down to the fact that we always want to start at a better starting point. We want to provide a platform for both projects and processes to not have to start from ground zero. And we build this into the way our engineers code. We build this into the accelerators that we've built similar to Assert.IQ, Ask.IQ, Verify.IQ, and the other, accelerators will be coming in the Intelligence Studio. But it's really not an afterthought. That's what you said, Erica, is key. It is built into the DNA of the way that Spark works. And so while today we're going to talk about, we're spending most of our time talking about QA, and I think this is a powerful concept in QA. It unlocks things that really um, weren't possible before. I was laughingly telling Jarius something I don't think that he knew before I actually started my career, proving how terrible a QA engineer I was. I'm way better at building than breaking things, and I would try to think of ways to turn things upside down and shake it and click the button 35 times, and while I'm turned to the left, and that breaks it, where somebody like Jarius has the ability, he and his team have the ability of thinking what could possibly happen. And I think, really that's why we built Assert.IQ. We want to enable people like me who are really more of a builder, and I'm good at building and architecting things, but I don't always think of the way what I'm doing might break. And so Jarius's team is able to, what we want to do is enable Jarius's team to come in and do the things that only he and his team can do. And we want to leverage AI to to make sure that the code that I write is meeting the acceptance criteria. We use AI to expand the test cases to areas that I might not think of. Jarius could think about those things in his sleep, and then enable Jarius and his team to do the things that humans do best, which are think of those edge cases, to think of the scenarios that we might not think of. And so our goal in creating Assert.IQ is to and I'll use the term we used before, shift that process left. Jarius, can you talk a little bit about kind of how this will enable you and your team to do the things that really you're the best at rather than me or AI or anything else? Could you kind of talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, yeah. You bring up a good point. I think what this is right now is we're trying to get everyone on the same page. Historically, that's been a challenge, right? Some companies, um, we all understand what silo teams look like and feel like.
Yep.
We all understand the great divide between development teams and QA, right? We all have our experiences and opinions on that. But I think right now, I don't just think, I believe right now is very important for everyone to get on the same page. And quality intelligence allows us to do that. Spark Intelligence Studio allows us to do that. Um, but not just move forward at the same velocity everyone else is moving forward at. You brought up hybrid engineering. I think that's a good call out. It's basically we're putting product and services together where for a client, we're starting with a proven kit and then we're tailoring that last mile to their reality. But here's the kicker, it's with guardrails built in, right? And that's what I really want to call out is the fact that we have taken our time to think things through intelligently, all pun intended. I was just speaking with another colleague the other day. She was talking about how every developer she talks to, they keep telling her, AI can do its own code reviews and AI can do everything, right? And then I just politely sent her an article of another company where in the past 6 months they've had 4 outages already due to AI assisted code. Um, So when I say we have to put guardrails in, I think that's the part where Spark, we've really thought through this in terms of how Assert.IQ and quality intelligence can help. Um, Now, the last thing you just said, Josh, about how the humans can play an important role in that, I think that's the most important piece. Um, what I'm seeing is there's a few companies that are just blazing ahead with AI. But the ones that are falling over or not seeing return of investment are the ones that are not, um, they're losing their trust in the human side of things. I think at Spark and the way we have designed this intelligence mindset is we have become the directors. Um, we've become the managers of whether you're building a generative AI product or you're building out agents, things like that. Um, we still need to have some kind of monitoring and direction, level of direction for these AI tools. So going back to the hybrid mindset or the hybrid engineering. So what this looks like from the QA side, right? There's two pieces. There's a standardized part of it, and there's a customized part of it. So there's in QA there's a lot of repeatable command mechanics, and those are things like how we turn requirements into tests, uh, how we gate the builds, how we report confidence. With hybrid engineering, we can now standardize these mechanics so that we don't reinvent every time. So then we can customize the pieces that should vary, like your critical flows, risk tolerance, whatever tooling that you have. So the result is a little faster. It's a faster time to value, and the governance is trustworthy, right? So for the standard piece, what does that look like? These are your repeatable system parts. One is like how we start, intake and then baseline, what your current QA pain points are. Two is how you generate coverage, the common patterns or templates that we use for the test. Three is, how we enforce quality, usually through CI/CD, quality gates, some good documentation, some definitions of done. How we show confidence, usually reporting dashboards and release readiness signals and things like that. Where we come in at that last mile and customize things for you is by focusing on what matters, like your particular business critical user journeys, things that we absolutely cannot break. Also, how risk is scored. So we can build a domain risk model based on the different signals that you have to leverage. Um, Also, where it can plug in, right? This could be in Jira, GitHub, ADO, ServiceNow, whatever your tool chain is. And then also what's acceptable. And these are approval thresholds, compliance constraints, release cadence, things like that. And then lastly, how we want to roll it out, right? So we're looking at change management pieces, your team workflow, things like that.
And
So how
and this
does
is really important, right? Because this is where the time to impact really makes a difference, right? If you have the standard ability to enable people to have QA at scale, and then they can optimize it no matter whatever they need for whatever their individual platform is, as you're saying, and then, apply it in that format.
Absolutely. I think the hybrid engineering approach is how we are able to move fast without being reckless, right? We're locking in repeatable foundation, and then we're tailoring the risk controls as needed, like you said.
And those guardrails are what people are concerned about. So let's move on. I think we have another slide after this one that might even drill down a little bit further. We've talked about Intelligence Studio at a high level, but really it's again those guardrails. So, not to belabor the point, but we have a lot of experience here in terms of rolling this out because your team has developed these accelerators based on feedback from client after client after client. When you've seen challenges that your clients are facing time after time, that's when you start to think, we can do this, right? This is how it came about. Isn't that right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think this is why Assert.IQ is powerful. Um, it can turn acceptance criteria into those executable tests, right? It can help predict the quality of risks or the risk quality, right? And it can help keep the quality signals aligned as the systems change. So the win here is, I think I mentioned earlier, the win is better decision quality, release confidence. Leaders can move from asking, "Hey, did that thing pass?" and start asking questions like, "Do we have the confidence to ship that?" It's part of a bigger series. But yeah.
Yeah, I think what you're saying here is, and we're using the word guardrails a lot. And one of the things that really sets Spark apart, related to our use of AI, is that for us, it isn't the end all be all solution for everything. It isn't like magic fairy dust that you sprinkle on a problem and all of a sudden the problem goes away. We view it as a way to help us drive better outcomes faster and more effectively and predictably, to Jarius's point, for our clients. And so those guardrails are part of, that's where our embracing new technology meets our engineering rigor and seniority. We understand when and where to leverage AI. We understand the way to keep the human in the loop, to be able to make sure that it's doing what it's supposed to do and driving the outcomes that we've tasked it to drive, while at the same time ensuring that quality, throughput, risk, quality is going up, risk is going down, throughput is going up, and our predictability is getting better. And so we don't want to use AI just because we want to check a box somewhere in some report that says we're using AI. And our use of AI in QA is a great example of that, because we're leaning on, to your point, Erica, we're leaning on our experience in doing this for a long time, and B, we're leaning on experts like Jarius to say, where can we leverage these tools in a way to better drive outcomes for our clients? We are not looking to just check a box and say, guess what? We used AI in this solution. If it doesn't drive better outcomes for our clients, it serves no purpose to us. So what we're trying to do is to leverage our experience, our ability to use new technologies. Spark has always been a company who is on the cutting edge of whatever is next. Our shop, which is what we call our labs, they're always experimenting with what's next and how that we can be better as a company. And so using AI is just the next new technology, the new paradigm that we're embracing. But with that, we've always paired it with the expertise that leaders like Jarius bring to say, here's where we can leverage this best, and here's where we want to make sure that the guardrails are in place to help us ensure the quality that we've promised and our customers and clients have come to expect.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. I want to take that even further, especially let's narrow it down to just Assert.IQ, right? So here's what makes Assert.IQ different, and here's why it matters. So it's one, it's not just another SaaS product, and like Josh was saying, it's not a blank slate. It's not just an AI tool. It's really a structured starting point, especially for your most repeatable QA problems. And we can think of it as solving three different areas. One is what we're talking about now, which is guardrails, right? The guardrails are baked into Assert.IQ. We all know about the different quality gates, CI/CD, things like that. Earlier, I spoke to what I would call an audit trail, to being able to go back and use historical data. But the third part of the guardrails is still the human, right? The humans still need to be there to check the big stuff. The second part of this Assert.IQ are the signals that we were talking about. Those signals help us flag risk early. Um, and then we all still keep, the requirements, the tests, and the risk. We're keeping everything connected. And like I said, it's a starting point, whether you're a small shop, a large shop. It gives us a really good baseline to now go and use whichever AI tooling that we want to bring in. And I think what you said was important, Josh, is we're not just using AI. That's not the goal. As a matter of fact, we're still in the middle of an arms race, right? The dust hasn't settled yet. The tools change every day. They evolve every day. The tools will be there. The mindset and the paradigm shift is I think the main part of this Assert.IQ. We're stepping in. We understand all the risks. We understand what's going on. We're keeping our ears to the streets to pay attention to how companies are using AI successfully, unsuccessfully. And so we're taking a really, really intelligent approach about this. And I think that's the main pieces of Assert.IQ.
I love that. I love that. That's a great way to kind of summarize what it is that you're delivering it and why. Let's go to the next slide and see, I think we talk in the next slide just a little bit, connected intelligence. Again, I think we hit on a lot of this, but are there any areas here that you think we really need to drill down on and to help, the listeners understand why this is so important? I think, when you talked about we're not leveraging AI just to leverage AI. It's a tool. It's part of what we have, and it's part of the foundation of Spark and how we are building things. And so I think that's very clear when we talk about these accelerators, and Assert.IQ is certainly one of them.
Jarius, do you want to take that? I'm happy to take a first stab. I think one of the things this slide illustrates broadly, and I think we can apply this to QA more specifically, is, I think we view these connected intelligence being embedded at every layer. It isn't just at the beginning or just at the end or just in the middle to make things go, code get generated faster. I think Jarius mentioned an example with one of our clients where we've seen that, in them reporting in the field that they're seeing this being a problem. That said, I think it's this measured use or this measured allocated view of intelligence that we wanted at every layer that really that gives us the advantage that we're seeing. And I think one other thing that Jarius, you mentioned big clients and small clients. And one of the areas that I think it's worth mentioning Assert.IQ is we've seen this framework be used in our biggest clients and in our very smallest clients. These are clients that you would recognize their logos, that you probably see them every day, and clients that you may never have heard of. And so these principles, because they're embedded at every single layer, and it's not a a one size fits all approach. This is a scalable framework of intelligence. And Jarius, maybe you could talk a little bit about just the layered approach where it applies to QA. But I think, you're going to see you could see a very similar slide for every area that we apply this idea of connected intelligence. But I think it has a very specific application with QA.
Yeah. When it comes to QA, this connected intelligence, again, I spoken this earlier, it's mainly it turns acceptance criteria into executable tests. That's one way we can look at this. Um, the other thing is it can help us predict quality risk. Um, Helps us again. The bottom line is better release decisions. If we look at in the news the companies that may have some blips using AI, I think that if we track that back, it's what are the things they were using or what things that could they have been using or paying attention to that could have led to better release decision. Even in the place of, okay, well, this AI did this agent made the decision, or this agent decided to delete this whole database, right? Should have been some guardrails, um, things around that, some better standards. Um, let's say you're using agents, right? Some better specifications put in place that the AI is using to know what to do, what not to do when it comes to guardrails, to prevent those things from happening. So, yeah, I think in just about any area of the company, taking this quality approach or this intelligence approach is probably the right thing to do. Um, you do have people on the spectrum, right? You have some companies who are very reluctant, very hesitant, very cautious, rightfully so. And then there are those who are just marching ahead. Um, and it's going to look different, whether it's a fully established client or a small shop, right? Depending on what tool sets they have in place, what signals they have in place. It will look different. I think where we come in is help give direction and guidance, especially for the shops who are really cautious, who are really hesitant about jumping into this AI. I think where we can bring some trust there, I think that will be the biggest impact to say, look, we got you. We see what's out there. We know what's going on. But here's how we are approaching this intelligently, maturely, um, and based on where you are, your baseline, what you have, we can help you move to the next phase in short order, right? Um, Responsibly. I think that's a good word.
That's
Yeah.
great. That's great. Well, let's go to the next slide because I think we just touched very briefly on, the different accelerators that we have. If you were um, able to see the previous webinar, we talked about Spark Intelligence Studio. Today, obviously, we're talking about Assert.IQ, which is the QA solution, and the next one we have coming up is Ask.IQ and then Verify.IQ. I highly encourage people to stay tuned to this sort of series because we're going to touch on solutions and these accelerators that are solving the real world problems that our clients are facing today. Um, Before we wrap up, guys, any last words other than stay tuned for the next one? But why why assert IQ and why now? Like I think you said, Jarius, it's a great way to start, even for those that are, fully embracing AI or those that are a little hesitant and are just getting started. What's the, wrap up sentence? Why now?
Yes. So right now, I think it's important um, to move very methodically, slow down to speed up. Um, I think that is the biggest why. You don't have to look far to look at some of the lessons from some companies that are moving ahead and maybe tripping a little bit, but at the same time, they're learning fast as well. They're failing fast. So I think now is the time um, to use something like Assert.IQ in the entire intelligence studio, so that you don't get left behind. We can keep up with trends, stay relevant, and continue pushing whatever your product is and your service is. So yeah.
Yeah, I would just echo that. I think Jarius did a good job. I think I'll say two things. First, if anybody's interested in hearing more about Assert.IQ, Jarius and I would love to jump on a call with anybody who's attending here today and give you a walkthrough and talk about how we can practically implement something like this in your situation. As Jarius has said a number of times, it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. It's really customized. It's a customizable framework that can apply to any size business and multiple kinds of software development life cycles. And then secondly, in closing, super excited that Ask IQ is coming up. That is our Snowflake-based solution, talk to your data. And so that's going to be super exciting to talk about that with you all. And so I'm excited. Erica, thank you so much for hosting today.
Of course.
And Jarius, thank you so much for sharing your expertise.
Sure thing.
Thank you so much, guys. Jarius, if you can just go to the last slide, we just have your email addresses on there. If there are questions, we're happy to, go through any in-depth demos or walk you through what it is that we're doing here. You can also fill out a 30-minute request for a 30-minute working session to drill down. So thanks for attending today. And thanks, Josh and Jarius, for being a wealth of information. It was super helpful. Learn from you every day. Thank you, guys.